Well, let's bring in NHL Network insider Elliotte Friedman into the mix here. Elliotte, we're just talking about Kyle Palmieri being held out of the lineup in the Devils' last game, a statement made by his agents on social media. I'll ask you this. What would the Devils be looking for in return for Kyle Palmieri?
Well, I think we're all really curious to see here, are there going to be first rounders involved for rentals? I think teams are asking, but because the cap, Jackie, is going to be staying so tight for the next few years, there's a lot of teams out there saying, quite simply, we need to keep our first rounders because we're going to need good players on entry-level contracts to be able to play. So I think all these teams are trying to say, hey, we'd love to get a first rounder for some of our rentals. I think that's going to be a big challenge. So you're trying to get the best package of picks and prospects that you can get.
And the Devils, they might be able to do it just because it seems like they have a number of suitors that are interested in Palmieri, but I guess we'll find that out over the next couple of days, maybe the next couple of hours. But I wanted to ask you, Elliotte, about one team that's kind of fascinating to me is the Arizona Coyotes, because you have a relatively new owner there. You have a new general manager. He's not really married to a lot of the players. The coach's contract is expiring at the end of the year. They have some interesting players there, and yet here they are. They find themselves with a 3-point cushion in that fourth playoff spot as we speak in the West. What are you hearing about the Coyotes and what they might do as we look forward to next Monday?
Boy, I got to tell you, I think they're in a really interesting position, EJ, because I think that the plan was always to try to restock as many draft picks as they could possibly get and prospects that they could possibly get. Now, I think they were looking at their expansion list, and I think they might have to keep one of their defensemen in order to potentially expose an expansion. But I looked at a lot of their situations and said they could move almost anything to get more players and picks. But look at it right now. I mean, you also have to, please your market. And what kind of message are you sending if you blow up your team when you're in a position where you could make the playoffs, especially in a market where you really battle to keep your spot in the fan base? So I think they're, honestly, Bill Armstrong, all he would say to me last week was the players will dictate. Well, the players are dictating they're staying in the race. So, I think they've got some interest in Garland. I think they've got some interest in their UFAD. But, I mean, how do you break it up when you're in the race and statistically you're the favorite?
Yeah, it's really terrible, Elliotte, when a good season gets in the way of the best laid plans, unfortunately. But it's a good problem to have for the Arizona Coyotes. Elliotte, you coined the phrase belle of the ball, and you named Matthias Ekholm as that player. But we don't think he's going to be traded. So who's your new belle of the ball, and who might have interest in this player?
Boy, that's a great question, actually, Brian. I think the belle of the ball, who could it be? I think David Savard potentially is one. I think he's a guy who's got some playoff, he plays the kind of way that you think you're going to need to play in the playoffs. And I really do think that there's a situation where there's a few teams that could be interested in him. I do wonder if a team like Tampa Bay is going to take a run at David Savard to see if they can make it work. I think Palmieri is an interesting one. I think Taylor Hall is an interesting one. I don't know if there's an overwhelming player that I look at and say, that's the guy who everybody would agree on. But I think Savard has a chance to be a pretty interesting guy. The other guy I would say, depending on if Anaheim can get what they want, Rickard Rakell. I think he could be an interesting guy too. I think Anaheim's interested in doing things. They just have a specific need, 19 to 23, ready to play. And I think those are hard to find and hard to get.
Well, I'll be the one to ask you about the Toronto Maple Leafs goaltending situation. Freddie Anderson's been out. Jack Campbell, as good as he has played, is not playing at 100%. How aggressively do you think Toronto's front office will pursue a goaltender here 7 days from the deadline?
I think, Jackie, they're doing their groundwork, and I think they've been doing their groundwork for some time now to figure out exactly what they've got to do here. And, I think that some of the names they've looked at, I think they've looked at Arizona's guys, Rantanen, Kemper. I think they've looked at Ullmark from Buffalo. I believe they've looked at Riddick from Calgary. I think they've basically called anybody that might have a goaltender available and said, what would we need to do or what would you be interested in? I think the thing that could make this even more complicated bit is that I do think that Anderson might have to go out in any trade where they make, because they just don't have a ton of cap room. Anderson's cash this year is $1 million. He was paid a $4 million bonus before the season, so I think it makes it easier. But I think it's a complicated situation because Toronto, I believe, also wants to add the best player that they can add in addition to a goaltender if they feel they have to do it. So I think Kyle Dubas has got a lot of moving parts as he tries to figure out where he's going to go here.
All right, Elliotte, let me ask you about the team that is leading the National Hockey League as we speak, the Florida Panthers. And they have a goalie in Chris Driedger that is an unrestricted free agent. They've just brought in, Spencer Knight there as well. What's the situation in Florida? I would think they are looking to add with the group they have, but might they be willing to trade Driedger just because he's a UFA at the end of the year?
Yes, I do think that's a possibility, EJ. I've been doing, I've probably done about 45 interviews today, and I hope this one is good. And people keep asking me, who are your teams to watch? And, two of the teams I really think are going to be interesting. We talked about Toronto for the reasons we just mentioned, and the other one I'm mentioning is Florida. Because I think that when you look at Florida's ownership, Viola, and you look at the GM, Zito, those are people who are not afraid. They strike me as people who will step up and say, we want to take a big swing. And the players this year in Florida, they have sent the message that they deserve a big swing to be taken on their behalf. They're in first place. They've played really hard. They've played above their heads. I don't know if you can replace Ekblad, but I think the team has earned the right that the organization should try. So I think the Panthers are a team that could take a big whack here. I was on a couple weeks ago with you guys, and I said I think they have some interest in Taylor Hall, but I think they will try to take a big whack here to improve their team. They feel their players have earned it.
All right. Well, Elliotte, interview 45 comes to conclusion. Good luck with the next 27 that you have, I'm sure. Yes. But I'm sure we'll be talking to you daily on this network as we get closer and closer to next week's trade deadline. Thank you for this.
I never thought I would say this, but I'm tired of listening to myself talk.
Well, we aren't, so keep your phone on.
That's right.
All right, guys. Take care.
See ya.